Hello, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to Autocar's favourite test quarry for off-road vehicles, where we have the new Toyota Land Cruiser, which has come to meet two of its key rivals, the Land Rover Defender and the Ineos Grenadier. Stay tuned.
To meet the new Toyota Land Cruiser then, we've invited the main competitor 4x4s. We'll be putting them through 3 off-road challenges, an axle articulation test, a hill climb, and then a more general test of manoeuvrability, visibility and ease of use. First though, the technical details of these cars, and you can find their full off-road specific data tables in the description below.
The new Land Cruiser picks up a little bit from where the old one left off. It is still a separate chassis 4x4, it's got a solid live axle at the back, it's got independent suspension at the front, it's got a 2.8 litre 4-cylinder diesel engine making something like 200 horsepower but nearly 300 foot-pounds of torque. That drives all 4 wheels through an 8-speed torque converter automatic gearbox. It's got electric power assisted steering for the very first time, but because it is still a separate chassis car, the weight is around just over 2,400 kilograms. There is a locking centre differential, there is a locking rear differential. Its wade depth quoted is 700 millimetres. Like all these cars, it can tow up to 3.5 tonnes, and that is the Land Cruiser. And this is the Ineos Grenadier. This has live axles front and rear, so solid beam axles front and rear, and for that reason it has recirculating ball steering rather than rack and pinion, which I'll come on to a little bit more when we drive it. There are 3 locking differentials, one in the middle, one at the back, one at the front, and that is the order in which you can engage them independently. It is quite a rugged vehicle. That is the point of it. There are petrol and diesel options with this. This one is the petrol. Okay, so it's a 6-cylinder BMW petrol engine making 282 horsepower and about 330 foot-pounds. It's so much in the mould of the old Defender that Land Rover sued Ineos to try and stop them making it look like this. Basically, that's how much they think it looks like the old Defender and how much it does what they think the old Defender does. It is a car built for a very specific set of purposes, quite compromised on the road, but let's see how it fares as a result off of it. And finally, this is the Land Rover Defender. This is a D350, so it's a 3-litre diesel with 350 horsepower, as the name suggests, and over 500 foot-pounds of torque.
This is a Defender 90. We tried to get a 110, but this is what was available to us. The shorter wheelbase will give it some advantages, most notably regarding its breakover angle and weight.
The Defender is the only one here that has a unitary chassis and body combination. That makes it also the lightest car here, about 2.4 tonnes. It would probably still be the lightest car here, even if it was a 110, which is the long wheelbase one. It's also the only one here that's on air springs, so that gives it the best ground clearance, it gives it the best wade depth of like 900 millimetres, it gives it the steepest breakover approach and departure angles of the 3 as well. It's on independent suspension, front and rear, but it gets a locking rear diff, it gets a locking centre differential. But let's see how that ethos translates to coping with our 3 set challenges and much more besides.
And so to the first challenger, drive across a mogul field for an articulation test. It's one of the simplest yet most revealing tests there is, challenging the clearances underneath each 4x4, plus their ultimate axle articulation and the ability of their differentials and, where fitted, electronics to distribute power accordingly. First up, the new car.
Steering's really light, really easy. The diff's now working to just keep traction going. It's just reverted to an exterior camera mode, but it's then swapped away from it. It's just a bit, you know, just do one or the other, mate. You don't need to do both. Just hear it there, you can feel, did you hear that? I don't know if you could hear that, I could feel it. Is it just sort of slips until it goes, oh, okay, and then the diff puts power across to the wheel that has traction. And I can feel I'm at a sort of tipping on 2 wheels point here. It's going to sort of drift over any minute, but it's very painless in here. It's very calm, quiet, big long throttle travel, Now, I've got a tiny bit of accelerator on, I don't know how much you can see, but it's really easy to meter out very small amounts of poke. It's a very calm, and at the moment it'll touch down like a buttery smooth, not Ryanair landing. Easily done, easily done. Apart from that little sort of one bit where it just went as it was trying to decide exactly where it should put its traction. And then as I drive out of it, the front diff is not locked, so it will turn at the front quite easily. That may not be the same in the Ineos from just sort of messing around earlier, but we'll have a go for proper and see how it gets on. It's the narrowest car here, and visibility is very good, very upright pillars, a narrow bonnet, and I can really see to the edges of it. There is some old school Defender about it from that point of view. It is the narrowest body, and I can feel it in these conditions. And there's no, because the diffs are just locked, there's not a sense that it's diverting power from one side to the other at any given point. All three diffs are locked. I can't see from in here, of course, as well as you'll be able to from outside, whether the wheels are staying on the ground for longer than they were in the Land Cruiser. But it feels from in here like it is dealing with it more easily. So that feels like the point to me where there's two wheels on the ground and it's just easing up absolutely without drama, without problem. There's a reason the Ineos has recirculating ball steering, and that is the fact that it's got a live axle on the front. Live axles on the front live axles each end allow rather a lot of articulation. If you've got an axle that's moving around like that, hang on, let's put it like that, what that means is the whole thing moves around, and if you have rack and pinion, which is quite a direct link to the front, that can give quite a lot of kickback to the steering. Recirculating ball, for reasons I don't quite understand without having a look at a diagram, it works much better with a live axle because it doesn't divert, it's mounted to the axle, and therefore it doesn't kick back as much as rack and pinion system would. With independent suspension, one, you have a lighter unsprung mass because only the sort of ends are moving and not the middle, which is good for on-road ride and handling. It's probably less durable, but it also means you can fit a rack and pinion steering because you don't get the kickback all the way through to the rack. That is why this car has slow recirculating ball steering, but this is a steering system that doesn't respond well to self-centering and stuff like that. Also, because the front diff is now locked, it wants to push on a bit at the top of this slope. We'll see that again, I suspect, in the sort of manoeuvrability test, but it certainly dealt with the articulation test from in here. I don't know how you saw it from outside, but it felt from in here that this was a calmer, better thing than the Toyota. Immediately, this is lighter. It feels a big car. I can see the edge of the bonnet, but it feels a wide car because it is. But it is the lightest car here. It is the car with the highest ground clearance. They fitted it with some fairly serious off-road rubber. When you go into rock crawl mode in this, it does lengthen the throttle travel, if you like. If you put it into sand mode, where you want a lot of power all the time, a little bit of throttle gives you quite a lot of response. In rock crawl mode, it knows I don't want to suddenly deploy 300 horsepower. So what it does is it sort of lengthens the throttle travel so that I get more control over small amounts of metered out power. That does make it a very smooth car to drive in these circumstances. I can go from barely creeping to standstill in basically no effort at all. Both front and rear diffs are showing as locked. And the interesting thing is it will sort of show, if you've got the time to look at it, it will show how effectively locked they are. It's also showing the articulation of the axles. So it's quite involved from that point of view, but it doesn't have to involve me from a driving point of view. I can just forget about it all if I really want to. You can sort of feel it just sort of willing itself up. There's not a lot of slip going on. It's a really smooth, probably the smoothest experience. Steering is very light, very accurate. I mean, that was about as drama-free as driving to the shops.
The Grenadier, with its live axles and manually locking differentials, wins this round, but all three cars deal with our moguls respectably. Our second challenge is a muddy hill climb. Now, tyre choice cannot help but play a big part here, but so too do features intrinsic to each 4x4, such as their power and drivetrain capability, their weight, and even the suspension's ability to keep the tyres in contact with the ground.
If I go to where the shadow meets the cone, then it will be the same starting point for all three. I don't want to necessarily give one a bigger advantage of a bigger run up than others. I'll leave it in drive, so we're just going to give it a crack, see how it goes basically. I'll make sure I take the same path each time. There's a rut there, there's a rut here. It does slip a little bit towards the top, but that was fairly painless and straightforward, wasn't it? It was very painless and straightforward. Anyway, swap cars, see how we go. I'm going to try and go in exactly the same wheel tracks as I was before, leave it in drive, same way as the Toyota, see how we go. If that doesn't work, we'll move on, try something else. There's a bump here, there's a bump there, and it's starting to run out of traction, but it gets up in the end. It did not go as easily, I don't think, as the Land Cruiser did. It did go up, but not with the same level of ease. I could have left it in auto, but we're in mud ruts, we're in drive. Follow the same path and see how we go. Didn't give it full throttle because it didn't feel like it needed it. Oh my goodness, this is... well, that's just ridiculously easy. It just feels like a lighter vehicle than certainly the Ineos, probably both, but certainly the Ineos. Ultimately, you can do what you want with the electronics, and you can do what you want with diffs, and you can do what you want with rubber and everything else, but when there's like 300-400 kilos in it as well, that is a huge difference.
Finally then to the least specific test here, a drive through some tight trees, up and down short diagonal slopes, the sort of terrain and driving that's common if you have a lot of land to traverse. It's a more general test of visibility, ease of use, drivability and manoeuvrability.
So, to the Land Cruiser first. Which of these is the easiest to just hop in and out of as a sort of almost like a working vehicle? It does feel quite a big car through this section of trees. Can't see where the bonnet ends. Steering is very light. Judge perfectly where that tree is without running into it. Can stop on that downslope without a bother. And then we head round into sort of section 2. Turning circle is pretty good. This is a big car, as you can probably tell from this camera. When I go up here, the bonnet is big, and you kind of lose sight of quite a lot of stuff out of the front. And then I want to turn a very sharp right, and I don't think any of these cars will do it in one go. This is a large car, but it is making the most of what it can do. I mean, it'd be easier in a Suzuki SJ, wouldn't it? But this is a different kettle of fish. It's a good thing. Right, to the Grenadier for the loosely titled manoeuvrability test. A bit of trouble just gauging where up on the steering wheel is. I suppose you get used to it with this little lump at the bottom and this little thing at the top. But the turning circle is not as good. And of course it is a heavier steering system than the Land Rover. The Land Cruiser. And turning circle is not by any stretch as good, but visibility is fantastic. So good. So good. I mean, I can tell, and actually there's a camera just over there pointing at it, I can tell that I missed hitting that overhanging branch by maybe that much, and I could tell exactly by how much I missed that branch. Feels a bit more on tippy toes as you go over here, and it doesn't want to stop quite as convincingly on the way down as the Land Cruiser did in terms of sort of pedal feel. It's not quite as responsive or millimetrically adjustable as the Land Cruiser. With all the diffs open, it is happier to turn, as you would imagine, but it's still got a larger turning circle, I think, than the Land Cruiser. And here's the sort of thing where you might want, this is the thing, you want the diffs open immediately there to turn the corner, and now you might want the diffs locked because you want a bit more grunt up this very slippery hill, and that's where some of the systems in a more complicated car are working in your favour. This will go up, and in fact it will go up with all these diffs open eventually, but it's a little bit slippy, it's a little bit funny. But there is a pleasing honesty about the way the Grenadier goes about things that I like a great deal. There are many things that count in its favour, and there are a few things that do not. This is one of those swings and roundabouts sort of tests. You know, it's hard to be truly definitive because it depends where you're going to use them and how you're going to use them. So in the Defender, I've got everything in auto. Turning circle is amazing, but it's a short one, right? But the others don't make a short one. So we are where we are. You know, swings and roundabouts. If you have a 130, which has got the longer wheelbase plus then the extension out the back, it's obviously not as manoeuvrable as this one. It's quite interesting to watch what is going on as it sort of decides where it's going to put a little bit of extra poke or stoppage and what it's going to do with the diffs. Visibility is probably not as good. Well, it is not as good as in the Ineos, which is a little bit of slip there that I didn't get in the other two. And also it's a wider car. You can't do anything about that. It is just wider. That is physics. And the turning circle is good. The steering is light. It's very easy to meter out just as much brake or throttle pressure as you want. It's the sort of car that you could do a day's work in it, get out at the end and kind of not had to think about it too much. I do lose quite a lot of visibility here. This camera is a really practical, functional thing. It is not a gimmick. And the steering, I really love the steering on these. It's just so light, but also so accurate, so easy, so willingly responsive. Car turns very easily. I can't judge where the nose is. It's not a big deal. How would you conclude? How would you conclude? This is an easier car to manoeuvre around in than the Ineos, but it's wider. Visibility is not as good versus the Ineos, which has a much longer turning circle, much heavier, less easy steering. Even if you had a long wheelbase Defender, the same would be true.
The most capable car in our tests today is the Land Rover Defender. But ultimately, like a track car test where one sports car might be faster in a corner but another quicker down the next straight, there is no one way to making the optimum 4x4. If you're a hobbyist, you might also look at a Jeep Wrangler, or if you've got a load of dirty kit to carry, many pickups are almost as capable as these cars. Or if you're on a tighter budget or have smaller spaces, consider a Suzuki Jimny. For more details, as well as the full specifications below, there are loads of road tests and reviews over at Autocar. If you want to read any story we've written about any 4x4, you can access the full 130-year Autocar archive at themagazineshop.com/Autocar. Many thanks for watching. See you next time.